I'm Victoria Alexander, and welcome to Buying into Brooklyn. I'm the owner of Realty Collective, a boutique real estate firm that has started now crossing out 19 years and writing 20 years in my notes that I started to defy the stereotypes associated with real estate brokers, especially here in New York City. You all know them, and I hope that you don't have the experiences that are associated with them. So let's Oh, my job is to be your matchmaker, your therapist, your sounding board, your guide, your coach on this wild roller coaster ride that is the home buying process in New York City. Like I said, New York City is very specific. So if you've bought anywhere else, it's probably not going to be the same as the rest of the country. We have this crazy thing called co-ops, and in California, they don't even have lawyers. So it's a very different process than anywhere else. And my job is literally to guide you through this process and advise you I don't have to say almost anymore, with my 20 years of experience, plus, because I've owned this company for 20 years in the Brooklyn market. And I've experienced so many things that's surprising when something comes along the way that I haven't had to go through with my clients. And it's my job to get you to your first home and across the finish line. And I know there's a lot of questions about what cost there is for agents these days because there's been some change in the laws around commissions. And in New York City, I would say 95% of listings, the sellers are still paying the buyer's brokers, but that's something we can discuss one-on-one or in this class if you have questions about it further. So I'm going to introduce you to the other three people you need, two people, because you need three people to build out your team. I'm going to introduce you to Harry Bennett from Go Rascal. Introduce yourself and tell us a little bit of what you do.
Yeah, thanks, Victoria. Thanks for having me. I hope everybody's staying warm out there. We're almost to spring and hopefully buying season for most of you guys. As Victoria said, I'm Harry Bennett. I am a mortgage broker with Go Rascal. Our company is based out of Williamsburg, so we're Brooklyn based too. I'm licensed actually in 39 states, so most of my business here in New York, but I can attest to what Victoria was saying because deals in Florida or California take 2 weeks to close, and I wish it was like that here. But we'll get into the meat and potatoes of that. Ultimately, just a little background on myself. I used to be an agent. I used to do rentals and sales. I got into finance about 6 years ago. So now I'm a mortgage guy here, but I've bought property in New York, rented it, sold it, lived in it. So I've done everything but the attorney side, which is what Talia's for. So I'm an open book, open resource, and would love to help you guys get your financing down for this. So thanks for having me.
Oh, you're on mute, Victoria.
I'm on mute. I was going to say, do you want to introduce yourself?
Yes, absolutely. Hi, everyone. And yes, thanks, Victoria, for organizing this and putting it together. My name's Talia Bashami. I am a real estate attorney. I've been practicing now for about 17 years. My office is based out of the city, but I close within all the boroughs, Westchester and Long Island. So I do all residential real estate transactions, meaning I represent buyers and sellers in co-ops, condos, single multi-families, and new construction sponsor sale. So what I do is I represent you in your purchase. I essentially handle all of the contract review and negotiation, along with all of the due diligence. So a review of the condo or the co-op, financials, the current state of the co-op or condo, reviewing board minutes. I also prepare closing cost breakdowns for you, and I represent you throughout the transaction from start through finish. I charge a flat fee. I'm a flat fee basis. So 3,800 flat fee. Half I collect up front and the other half is at closing. And I do work with a lot of first-time home buyers. So I do a lot of hand-holding along the way because my goal is to make sure you guys have a very smooth and efficient process and reaching your goals of becoming happy homeowners. So that is what I'm here for. And you can see my QR code in my Zoom box that allows you to download my contact card, and feel free to reach out to me at any point whenever you're ready to buy.
But also do not forget that we're going to email all of our contact information to everybody on this call and those that are not watching now but have signed up and are going to watch later. So you'll have all of our information to reach out to Talia. And don't worry if you can't see the QR code because you're listening on Spotify. But so these are the three people you need for a transaction. You need and they all have a fiduciary responsibility to you. So this is where you start. Everybody really thinks about, oh, I'm going to go on Street Easy and I'm going to look at houses and get all excited. But really what you need to do is first assemble your team. And usually the first thing, a lot of people call me first, which I love because I want to make sure I can answer all your questions. But really, the first person you need to call is Harry and figure out what your buying power is and understand what the bank thinks about all your paperwork together and understands that, okay, this is what we think we're comfortable loaning you for, not what you used as the little calculator on Street Easy, but really you want to get a pre-approval letter so that you have it in hand. So when you start looking at property, you are armed with the information you need to make an offer if you fall in love with the first place that you look at. And like I say, to everybody, this is a job. You're going to spend a lot of time talking to all of us. You want to who you're talking to. You want to feel like they talk to you in a way that you understand and you can digest the information and that you have time to talk to into each other. Like working with both of these guys because you're going to work with them directly. They're not going to pass you off to someone on their team or legal aid or somebody like that. You're going to be working with them directly to help you through your transaction and answer your questions. So you want to make sure when you're interviewing people, you're asking what's the size of their team? Do they communicate with you in a way that you like? Are you texting them? Are you emailing them? Are they picking up the phone? Make sure that your communication style and their communication style align because they work for you at the end of the day. And that's why I say interview people to feel confident in your decision making. I feel very good about what I do and the clients I attract. And I feel like you should feel that they're aligned with who you're working with because personality type is important. And you also want to pick people that have relationships and have been doing this a long time. I know I already said the 20 years now several times, so I'm not going to say it again, but you want to make sure that the people that you're working with have been doing this long enough that when I show a client a property, I'm usually emailing the other broker, especially in one Cobble Hill, Carroll Gardens. There are really dug in agents that have this territory worked on. And so when I say, hey, Heather McMaster, can I show my client this? Heather and I just closed a deal. She knows what it's like to close a transaction with me. She knows it's like to work with me on a deal and knows how this transaction and how I'm going to advocate for my clients and make sure that the deal gets closed. And that's what you want from everybody on your team is long-term relationships and industry knowledge that's going to help advocate for you to make sure it's smooth and stress-free. And also so that you are picked when it's time to put in your offer and get the property. So after that, then I usually talk about why we do this class. Educate you is designed to help educate you through this process. There's a lot of gatekeeping and unknowns in this process, especially in New York City. And so we're giving you a good place to start. Like I said, it's not all of the information, but it is a good place to help make you educated decisions to make the first steps. And we want you to feel empowered. And because this is one of the biggest investments that you'll ever make with the most amount of money that you'll ever transact in. I don't think anybody's going to be buying a car for the amount of price of real estate in New York City, or maybe they are lucky to do that. But we provide the basic information to get things started. Spera launched a poll that's going to ask you some questions about where you are in this process. And why don't, Harry, you talk about what's the first step that you usually take when going down this path with people?
Yeah, for sure. Just like Victoria said, it's really smart to speak to a mortgage professional, hopefully first, definitely in the beginning of the process, because as much as I love window shopping, you don't really know what you can get until you have a pre-approval in hand. And a lot of banks give out pre-qualifications. It's not the same as a pre-approval. A pre-approval is truly a stamp of approval from a lender stating that you can afford the amount that's on that piece of paper. And sellers are not going to take you seriously. Agents won't take you seriously until you have that. So that's definitely step one for you guys. I'll drop an application link and a calendar link here in the chat here in a second. So if you ever wanted to get in touch to go over it further, I'm happy to do it. But everything comes down to basically what's called debt to income ratio, or DTI. That's the acronym for it. So depending on your situation, the bank is going to look at how you make your money. Are you self-employed? Are you hourly? Are you salaried? Are you business owner? Whatever it may be, they're going to want to look at specific income documents. So it's my job to guide you through what documents you need to provide me so I can actually look at what your gross income is. I don't want to go over and bore you guys with the calculations of it, but basically, one of the advantages of working with myself at Go Rascal and a broker in general is that I have a slew of products, loan products that can match any type of borrower. And what I mean by that is a W-2 salaried employee usually is the easiest, cleanest income because it's just the same amount every month. And a lot of banks will take them, almost every bank. When you get into a situation where maybe you're a business owner or you're 1099 and your tax returns go up and down, or maybe it doesn't show a lot on paper, but really you're making a lot, that's where somebody like myself can really come in and really truly save the day, shine in a way, because I have loan products that are not really offered by bigger banks. Just one little tidbit there. But ultimately, when you get into a mortgage application and a pre-approval process, that's what I'm going to be looking at. The other factors to it are going to be your credit score, what kind of liabilities are on your credit report. So if you have maybe a car payment, student loans, other personal loans, that's going to be in a factor in your debt to income ratio. And then lastly is going to be your down payment slash type of property that you're buying. I know we're not going to probably go super deep into condos and co-ops right now. Typically with co-ops, you're going to want to see at least 20% down. With condos, you might be able to get away with a little bit less. Multifamilies or single family homes, you can go sometimes less on down payment too. The point is that there's basically those three main factors. What's your income, what's your credit, and what's your down payment? So once I gather all that information, my team's working really quickly. I can usually get you approved same day, if anything the next day, just depending on how fast you give me those documents. And once you have that letter from me that says pre-approved by Go Rascal, you're taking that back to Victoria and you're going shopping. So that's kind of, I guess, an overview of it.
You're going shopping, but what's happening now is that my clients are calling me and we're going to look at things and they have their pre-approval and we can get their offer in, but they have this blank spot on their lawyer because even though I've given them a list of lawyers like they asked me to and a list of questions of what to ask a lawyer when they're interviewing them, they're fumbling at the finish line a little bit because they haven't called and interviewed people. And you don't want to make this an afterthought. This is something you really want to think about and be very selective about who you work with. And that's why it's important that you call and talk to lawyers about, like I said before, I'm not going to repeat myself, about who you're working with on their team, how responsive they are. Do they understand what you're saying? Are they making time for you? And there's great lawyers to work with. So you want to make sure you pick the right one for you and not just look at the list and be like, oh, Victoria vetted them, then that's the right person for you. It's not always like that. I've had clients be like, you said they were good. I'm like, I said they were good, but not everybody is for everybody. And you need to pick what's right for you. I can't decide for you. Just like I can't tell you which house to buy. I'm not going to live there. And my choices of where I want to live, I live in Red Hook for almost 20 years now. This 20 years is becoming a theme. So you want to make sure that everything is right for your specifications. I'm here to guide you and give you advice, but I don't know what your specific needs are in a way that you do. That's just at the end of the day, you know your lifestyle, you know your quality of life, and you know how you need to hear people talk to you. And so that's why I say you should call Talia, and you should tell you, why don't you say, what's the first call like when you are talking to potential clients?
Sure. So whenever a client calls me and tells me that, oh, they're in the process of making an offer and they want to have their attorney lined up, we essentially go over the type of property that they're buying and what their goals are. So I ask them questions as far as, okay, are you looking at a co-op or a condo or a house? What is your closing timeline? Are you purchasing with anybody else? So are you doing a co-purchase? Or are you buying with a partner or your parent or whoever it may be? And also, what's your financing requirements? How much money are you going to be putting down? Rest assured, you probably already had a conversation with Harry and you've already determined how much of a mortgage you're financing. And then based on that information, I walk them through my process and essentially I give them a flow chart of what a co-op purchase looks like from A to Z, what a condo purchase looks like from A to Z, or a single family home or a two family home. So first I find out exactly what you are purchasing, how you are purchasing, and with who, and what's important to you, because my job is to protect your interests and, like I said, ensure that your goals are met. So I walk you through the entire process so you know exactly what to expect. I go over my fee structure, which I already told you guys about. So there's no surprises or hidden costs. And the way that I work is you work directly with me, start to finish. I do have a team. So I have one associate and two paralegals. So I am a boutique shop as well, which means you get very hands-on service. You get access to my email, my cell phone, text call, after hours, weekends. And the three pillars of my practice specifically are time, responsiveness, and communication. So time kills all deals, which means it's important that we work quickly together because we have to keep the boat moving so that other offers don't come to the table. And it's also my job to ensure that the time restrictions under contract are all met as well. And then communication and responsiveness. It's important that we all communicate. As Victoria mentioned, we are your team. We all work together. We all have essential roles in the deal. So I keep everybody CC'd, my lender, my broker, and my client, so that everybody knows exactly what's going on. And there's a level of accountability there because we're all here to support you to ensure, once again, you have a successful closing. I'm a deal maker, not a deal breaker, which basically means, look, we're going to hit bumps in the road. Issues might come up, but it's all about solution finding and problem solving. So we can get through it. And my job is to be creative with negotiation skills to ensure that, once again, we can get through any issues that may arise with Harry's help, with Victoria's help, to ensure that you get to the closing table. So our first conversation is really an overview of the process together and answering any questions that you may have.
Music to my ears when you say deal maker, not breaker, because I think that people not in the industry don't understand that lawyers can kill deals. Just plain out. I've had lawyers kill deals, sadly, for their client. They thought they were advocating for them. But really, that's why it's super important that you vet your team and the lawyers you're working with. I save this for later usually, but you don't want to hire your uncle. You don't want to hire your divorce lawyer. You want to hire someone that is specifically doing their bread and butter is everyday New York City real estate transactions. It's important that this is what they specialize in because they know they're going to have more referrals and more transactions by being a deal maker and making sure that everybody stays in their lane and they're accountable to each other. I love that you said that because I think people don't understand is like when they pick a lawyer that I don't have any relationship or rapport with or a mortgage professional, there's not accountability and I can't be hounding people that I don't have relationships with. And that I ask my clients, oh, please introduce me. So I have some rapport with them and I can contact them when I need them. And I ask about, okay, did you order the appraisal yet? It's day 2. The contracts are signed. Make sure the appraisal's ordered. I have a timeline to follow up. And if something goes haywire and I don't have that relationship, it's harder for me to do my job well because they've just picked somebody out of left field that isn't on the team. And like, I'm used to working with people like, oh, we do this together. And so I love hearing that from you. So once this is where you start, not on Street Easy. You've assembled your team, you've called everybody, you've vetted us all. You're like, this is who I want to work with. This is, I know is going to get me the experience I want because everybody talks about at the dinner table, oh, all of their real estate horror stories. And that's why I say I've started this company to defy stereotypes. It's all the people that are not good at their jobs, that aren't educated, that haven't been doing this long enough, that really can make this experience more stressful than it has to be. If you do this every day, like I said, you're a New York City real estate lawyer and you know this back of your hand, you're going to make sure that your client has the guidance and education they need so that every step of the way, they feel secure in their decision making and not, oh my God, what is happening? Nobody's communicating to me. That's the experience you want. And so that's why it's important that the first thing you do is figure out who your team is. Then you hit the ground starting to look at property. So I usually start with why buy now and all that stuff. But I think like why we all know the rent is too damn high. There's a couple other variables I think that are coming into play as we're heading into March. It's unknown what the world will look like, never mind what the mortgage industry will look like or the housing market. So I think that there's 2 buyers I have right now, which are, oh my God, I'm never leaving New York. I'm putting down roots here and I'm trying to figure out how do I get out of this rat race because I can't go back to my home state considering what will it look like when I go there. And then the other people that are saying, hey, there's too much volatility. Who knows if interest rates are going to go up or down with everything that's going on. I'm going to wait. So those are the 2 sort of buyers that I'm seeing in this market and I think that makes a lot of sense based on you want to feel committed that you're going to stay in New York before you buy something. And so if you don't feel like you're committed to staying here or you feel like there's job volatility, maybe now is not the right time to buy. So what are you guys seeing in this why buy now moment?
Harry, go ahead. And then I'll...
Yeah, sure. No problem. Yeah, I think to start the year, there's actually been, and this is nationwide, there's been an uptick in mortgage applications, not only for purchases, but refinances as well. Obviously, with administration change, there's still a lot that's early on that we'll see what happens. But I think the normal part of the industry right now is interest rates being between 6 and 7%. Just as a quick little market update on rates, this week specifically, we've actually seen a nice little drop. We're in like the low to mid 6% range again, which is nice to see. But I think if you're looking back over the course of the year and a half, again, 6 to 7 is that new normal. The 2 to 3% interest rates are the days of past, and it is what it is. But I think for a lot of people that understand what their payment is, and this goes back to that communication that I have with the clients up front on understanding what your expectations are each month on what your monthly payment needs to be. It's a fixed rate. It's 30 years typically. Sometimes there's adjustable rate mortgages you can get into. You're usually going to be fixed into a locked in amount every month. And there's always going to be an opportunity for a refinance. The average person in the United States refinances or sells their place every 7 years, which to me is actually a little bit on the longer end. I think 5 years is probably more what it's tailing to now. But the point being is your payment and your rate and what you're seeing now is not forever. There's always going to be a build of equity. Your property is going to appreciate because we're in the best damn city in the nation, in my opinion, especially for real estate. So you got that working for you. And I think the classic line of date the rate, marry the house is so true. And I think if you can get in that mindset, you're really going to do well for yourself and also keep the high rates out of your maybe negative part of your mind, so to say. But that's what I'm seeing, at least, is the uptick for sure.
I think that people really do, especially that saw what happened during COVID, are really out of line with what reality is. Like I bought my house in 2009 and rates were coming down then. They were at 5.5 when I went into contract, came down to 5.25, and I then got to refi 2 years after for 4.25. And I wish I had been able to take advantage of those COVID pricing there. The years before that, they were at 8 and 9% in the early aughts. So I think that just putting that into perspective on what rates could be. If you're worried about interest rates, pay down all your credit cards. That's probably the thing that's charging you're losing the most money on, and people are not usually aware of that. So what are you seeing, Talia, in this like where people are buying right now? It's the beginning of the year. I feel like it's always hard to understand, which last year I was like, oh, it's going to be a great year. And then it's built up and then dropped off like after April.
Yeah. So it's crazy because fourth quarter I was really busy. So the end of last year I was really busy. It was a lot of new deals. Yeah, it got a slow start earlier this year, first quarter. I think the spring market's going to definitely pick up. But like you said, the housing market follows the rental market. So people that are starting to get lease renewal options from their landlords, and it's rents are sky high. So for the amount of money that you're spending on rent, making your landlord rich, you might as well put that money in your own pocket and make yourself rich and build your own equity and build your own investment long term. I just think it just makes more sense. And I have seen an uptick in the new construction sponsor sales because inventory, as we know, is on the lower end. So if you are looking at options, there's a lot of sponsor sales that are giving a lot of concessions, closing cost credits, things of that nature, and you're getting a brand new property and you're able to be a little bit more competitive with your offer because developers need to sell those outstanding units that they have. So I'm seeing more sponsor sales coming across my desk, probably for that reason. But as Harry mentioned, the 6 to 7% interest rate range, I think people have wrapped their head around it. I think if you're going to wait for rates to drop significantly, it's not likely going to happen anytime soon, maybe in 2 or 3 years from now. But the beautiful thing about home ownership is you have all of these great deductions and tax write-offs. You can write off your interest, you can write off your property taxes. So at the end of the day, it reduces your income tax liability. And as we know, living in New York City, we're paying a very high income tax. So for all of those reasons, just home ownership, I believe, is a much better way to go as opposed to paying rent.
100%. And I say that to my clients too. You're paying somebody's mortgage no matter what. Either you're paying your own or you're paying your landlord. So figure out who you want to be investing in, yourself or somebody else. So I think that's a great strategy and advice for thinking about how the next year is going to play out, and that you need to just, I think, get over the sticker shock on this interest rate and realize that this is long-term investment in yourself and your life here in New York City. And getting my mortgage, just because I've had the house now 15 years, I'm paying half of what I would in rent if I was renting this house. So you really want to get ahead of where we all know things are going in the rental market, which is only really up. There was only small blips of it, and in the COVID, even when people weren't allowed to leave their house. So it was an anomaly, not the norm. So how do we find this dream house of yours? Where do you start looking? Okay. So also I tell people the rent to buy matrix. We have a calculator we refer people to, the New York Times, where you can put all your numbers in and understand if you should buy or if you should rent. Because some people have, let's be honest, like rent stabilized, rent control apartments, they do exist. And if you're in a situation lucky enough to get there, then maybe you shouldn't be buying if you could feel like you can stay in that apartment for a long time. Go ahead, Farah. So doing your team, how much money down, credit score, you talked a little bit about this. And then I start asking people as they're narrowing down. A lot of people call me and say, anywhere in Brooklyn. So I really have people figure out what their timing is. Like, are they in a lease? Do they have to negotiate out of that lease, or are they month to month? What their budget is. And so talking to really not just Harry about understanding what your finances and your monthly will be, but what your monthly will be with what's the max you can pay on common charges and maintenance. Is it $500 or $1,000? That's going to range on what apartments you're going to be able to look at, because that monthly nut is going to affect what you feel comfortable with. And then what your long-term plans are. Is this an apartment for right now, for the next 3 to 5 years? Or are you planning a family in the next year? And what are your lifestyle needs? Do you need to be near a park? Do you need to be near a subway? I obviously don't need to be near transportation because I live in Red Hook. So it's just about what is comfortable for your own needs, and figuring out what you need to have a high quality of life in a city that, doesn't usually offer that. It offers it in lots of other things like culture and those things. So if you need to be next to BAM because you're going to be there every weekend, that's something, to take. Maybe you can be in a slightly smaller apartment because you're going to be right dead center in the thing that really brings you joy about living here. So these are the conversations we start having. And if you have a wide net, I start having you cast that wide net and then narrow it down. Let's go see apartments in Bushwick. Call your friends there. Ask them what they like about living there and what they don't like. What do they do on Sunday? Go get brunch with them at their favorite spot, and try to really understand if you're making a change in neighborhood because you can't afford to stay in the neighborhood that you've been paying egregious rent in. Really digest what your life will be like in that other neighborhood by calling your friends, spending time there on a regular basis. Because nothing worse when a rental, if you realize you moved to the wrong place, you get to break that lease. You can't do that with a sale. So you want to make sure you're really committed. Next slide. So then, okay, location type, and then so some of the amenities and then type is a co-op might not be for you. A co-op has restrictions. You can't rent it out usually, or you can only rent it out after a couple years, and they have to pass whoever you rented has to pass the board, and you have to pass the board, and you usually have to put down 20%. There are some co-ops that take 10%, or if you're buying a sponsor unit, you might be able to put down less. There are higher restrictions on and getting approval from the board about any renovations or upgrades. But the amenities are different. Like you might have a doorman in a co-op where you might not have that anywhere in other types of buildings, especially not in Brooklyn. Do you want to be in this new construction that Talia is selling here with all these amenities like a gym and a roof deck and a common room? Or what building is important to you as amenities? And then we can also see if those property types with those amenities exist in the neighborhood you want. If you want new construction, is Park Slope really going to have what you're looking for? Probably more on the 4th Avenue and into Gowanus side of it than if you're going to be right off the park, which is more older pre-war housing stock that's like 100 years old. And there's nothing wrong with either one. Just you need to understand the pros and cons of both. Housing that was built 100 years ago was built to last. And I would say that new construction, they're not using as high quality of materials, but that doesn't mean there's anything wrong with them. You're just going to spend a little bit more with your fellow condo owners making upgrades over time. But you'll do that with any property, because being a homeowner is responsibility. You don't get to call your landlord anymore to fix them. But every year I'm doing something to this house. So just expect that it's not going to be if you're buying a brand new apartment that you move in and everything's perfect, because nothing is perfect if we learn anything in life. Next slide. So where do you search? There's lots of online platforms. Yeah, we have a backend database so you can sign up to get listings from us. But then I always encourage people, I think Streety is really user friendly. It has a great alert system and usually has all of the listings from the Rebney brokers plus a couple others. A lot of other listing platforms don't update. They send you things that have been sold a year ago that have other brokers' information on them. That's the other thing to be wary of if you're looking at listings online. Make sure that you're sending them to your broker to contact the agent, because otherwise you're contacting probably somebody that paid to have their name on that listing and not necessarily the agent that's representing the seller, because that's whose name should be on it, the seller's representative. keep going, Farah. Okay, so I am going to cover this a little bit. I'm going to have Talia jump in. Is that we have narrowed it down, figured out, what your deal breakers are, and found you the property of your dreams. And you have realized you have the closing costs, that you need. I say 1 to 3% for co-ops and 3 to 5% for condos. New construction, the transfer taxes and some other fees are negotiable, and hopefully we've been able to negotiate some good terms for you if you're buying a new construction. Sellers pay something close to 8%, so don't, excluding the broker fee. So just be wary that, you're paying on both ends. So we did that part. And so now that we've found it and we're putting in an offer, we have to go over some terms of the offer. I'll say what the terms are, usually what that I have people consider, and then tell you, maybe you can jump in. You have a financing contingency because you're probably not paying all cash. You're getting a mortgage. We have an inspection contingency because we want an inspector to come over and look at the property and make sure it's not going to fall apart on day 2. Then sometimes we even negotiate in a mortgage contingency, and you can also buy a property as is, means that you're not allowed to, even if you have an inspection and they find something wrong with it, you're buying it as is, it's coming as is. That's why it's priced the way it is. So take it or leave it, but they're not going to negotiate when you find that there's a leak in the ceiling and you need a new roof. These are the points that we can negotiate on, as well as the price and the down payment and how fast you can close to make your offer more attractive to the other broker. And like I said, it's really important that you have a broker that has good relationships, because the other person on the other side of the deal, having a relationship with your broker and the lawyers and mortgage professionals and feeling trust in Go Rascal has a name for itself. It's not, you cannot pick Rocket Mortgage or like any of these online platforms that don't have a human. What's the other one?
Quicken Loans.
Quicken Loans. Yeah. There's all these online platforms that makes it very challenging, especially in co-ops, to close deals with them. So it's important you pick a company that has a real person behind it, that has, they know what they're doing. They know what a co-op is like, and they know how to do appraisals here. Wells Fargo has so many times messed up an appraisal in a deal for me. You want to make sure that it's relationships and businesses that your advisors trust. So if they say, listen to them. We're only trying to help you be less stressed. You guys, at this point, when we're putting in the offer and negotiating things, what is your role at both points? I think, Talia, you have a bigger role until we get accepted offer. But Harry, you can jump in.
Yeah, so for me, it's the seller's attorney always prepares the contract and sends it over to me for review. So my job is to make sure every single term in the contract is correct and accurate, and they're not trying to pull a fast one on us. So that means verifying the property taxes to make sure they're correct if it's a condo or a house. If it's a co-op, I'm verifying the monthly maintenance, making sure which is the monthly common charges for the unit, making sure that is correct. And I verify everything with management. I also check to see if there's any assessments, which are additional monthly payments, usually that go towards capital repairs, which means building repairs, like they're fixing the roof or they're updating the hallways or the elevators or whatever it may be. I verify the number of shares. If it's a co-op, that's because you're purchasing shares in a corporation, so you get a stock certificate. A lot of different nuances that you guys really aren't as involved in as I am, but that's my job. So I have to make sure the contract is correct. I also make sure the purchase price, the deposit amount, which is generally 10% in this industry across the board, which means you need to have your 10% deposit, which is 10% of the actual purchase price, liquid and ready to pay at the time of contract signing. So if those funds are in a 401k account or sitting in a brokerage account or something like that, you need to liquidate at least 10%. That is what we pay at the time of contract signing. And I also make sure that the loan amount on the contract matches the loan amount that are financing for the mortgage, and that the closing date is correct, and basically all the necessary terms. Now, rest assured, while I am negotiating all of the contract terms and verifying everything with management and doing my due diligence, I'm also going to prepare your actual closing cost breakdown and share all information with you as I receive it. Then we are going to set up a call before you even sign the contract We're going to set up another call. We're going to go over the terms together in full so you know exactly what you're signing. And then usually that's after 5 business days. So from the time your offer is accepted and Victoria says, great, we have a deal, we came to an agreement with the seller, the deal sheet will go out. That's when I collect the first half of my fee, as I mentioned, $1,900 up front. And then our 5 business days pretty much starts. This is when you'll do your home inspection. This is when I'm going to review and negotiate the contract. And then we will set up another call after everything checks out to go over everything together. You will sign off via DocuSign, and that's when you're going to wire your 10% deposit or cut a check if you feel more comfortable. So that's my role in the beginning once the offer and acceptance is completed and the deal sheet goes out.
And just to add to that, I think from a previous point, as Victoria said, I think it's so important to have, if it's not going to be a local person here like myself, you want to have somebody that definitely knows the New York market. I can't tell you how many times people have come to me that have used Quicken, who's based out of Detroit or Michigan in general, and maybe a Bank of America bank, which technically has offices in New York, but the loan officer is in like Illinois. They're not going to know the New York market. It's so important to have somebody that knows that. I guess during this process too, I'm definitely like the cheerleader. I'm the person throwing out the good vibes at this point because I'm just waiting for you guys to have I'm waiting for the contract to be signed at this point. So you guys have the pre-approval, hopefully what your numbers are. I'm happy to have the calls, let you know where the market's headed, where we're at with rate and stuff like that. But really my job doesn't start till that contract signed. So I'm guessing that's probably the next slide here, and I'm happy to talk about it.
Fair. Next slide.
Talia, did you want to go over due diligence, or is that, I know you mentioned it already, but
Yeah, so due diligence, essentially, I talked about it, but I'm going to review the board minutes for the co-op or the condo. I'm also going to verify, like I said, how the building overall financially is looking. So financials, do they have a good amount of reserve funds? Are they doing any capital building repairs or improvements? Do you have to be worried about local law 11, which essentially is a law in New York where buildings are required to update the facade, which is the exterior of the building, every 5 years. So are they looking at any large expenses? I also get the history of maintenance increases over the last 5 years. If you're buying into a co-op, I get the sublet policy for the building. So that's all the due diligence from the legal standpoint, the type of building. Now, Harry's going to obviously determine the lendability of the building, meaning can he approve the condo or the co-op project? And that's something that he'll discuss and share.
yeah, certainly. And I think that part of, I guess my part of due diligence is really getting to the lender questionnaire. There's an attorney questionnaire and a lender questionnaire that you guys are going to have to order. If the building's already on my approved list, I actually don't need it. And we have dozens of co-ops and condos throughout the city that already are on our approved list. But there's always stuff that's changing. So we're going to need to get updated paperwork constantly. But the point is, I think communication is super important at this point, because if you guys know that a contract's imminent, you had a good home inspection, you're feeling really good about the place, and the second you have a signed contract, I always suggest let's get that lender questionnaire filled out by the management company and paid for. It's usually a couple $100, anywhere from $300 to $600 depending on the building for that questionnaire. And the faster that we get that, the faster that I can approve your building and work towards a mortgage commitment, which I'm sure we'll talk about next year. So timing is key here.
Yeah, so I think that you can go to the next slide, but really it's about, okay, now the race. I always tell people, once you sign your contract, the most important thing is to get your mortgage professional all of the documents they are asking for, because we cannot, especially if you're in a co-op, schedule your co-op, submit your board package that I'm beautifully going to assemble with Farah, and get your board interview until we have something called your commitment letter. And that comes from the bank. And so if the bank is missing any documents, they are not going to give it to you. And then it just ties up the whole process. And co-ops take longer than condos. So your first action after you sign your contract and you give away your money is to get all of your paperwork to the bank so they can start working on your deal and get the appraisal ordered, because we're erasing the clock to make sure to get your commitment letter so we can submit your board package so you can get approved so you can schedule your closing. So why don't you talk about what that looks like, Harry?
Yeah, for sure. Three different types of properties, as you guys might know in New York, that you have co-ops, condos, and then townhomes or multifamily homes, single family homes, stuff like that. So with the townhomes, you don't have to really worry about the board, which is nice. But most of New York City real estate is dealing with either a condo or a co-op. And when we have a signed contract, that's where my job truly starts. I'm already going to have your pay stubs, your bank statements, your ID, your credit report, because I do all that stuff up front. So we have a nice package to send into the bank. But once I have that questionnaire as well, that's going to have a full application package that the bank can then review. During this time, we're actually already ordering the appraisal. You're getting a loan estimate that's also showing you line by line what to expect for closing costs. I always give my clients that ahead of time anyway, so you know what to expect. But it's an e-sign on a DocuSign kind of document. Once you sign that, then you're getting the appraisal ordered. It's essentially a race to the clock, like Victoria said, for the mortgage commitment. Typically on New York City real estate deals, you have 45 days to produce that. My banks move very quickly, so I'm really getting those in a couple weeks of mortgage commitment, sometimes even less. Really, the only time it could take a little bit longer is just how fast the management company can move with those questionnaires that I mentioned previously, which again is so important to get those ordered right away, just in case there's any back and forth. Basically, at this point in the process, I'm giving the whole package to the bank. They're doing their underwriting, which is called their review, and then they're giving us that mortgage commitment, ideally in much ahead of a time before 45 days.
Okay, so then once we get your beautiful board package into the management company who gives it to the board and they schedule your board interview and I prep you for that so you pass with flying colors and they say they can't wait to have you as their neighbor, they give approval. And then once they officially put it in writing, it's a specific, we just can't take their word. We give that to Talia and then she starts working with the bank to get the clear to close and start scheduling the closing. And you guys can I do the final walkthrough with you and then hand you keys at the closing. So my job is done there.
Yeah, and for me, I am preparing so typically once you are approved by the board, it takes about 7 to 10 days for the transfer agent or the co-op attorney to prepare all of the closing documents. At that point, I will prepare your closing statement, has a breakdown of all of your final figures and numbers due for closing. You will wire the funds to my escrow account about 48 hours before the closing, or you can bring certified bank checks. A lot of clients just prefer wires because it's less time and effort on their end, but whatever works best for you guys. And then we will meet at the closing table. So obviously I will confirm the date and time, make sure it works for you. And at the closing table, we're signing all of your loan documents, which we're going over together. We're signing all of the transfer documents, which we're going over together. And that is when you receive the keys to the property and either your deed, which is proof of ownership, transfer of title, or your stock and lease if you're buying a co-op, which also are your ownership documents. So at the closing table is when you become the new homeowner and you can schedule your move-in for the very next day. And now you are officially a happy homeowner.
I think that wraps it all up there on the process, the overview. There's so much more detail to go into on a lot of these things. So we're going to open up to questions. There's a couple people on, so I just want to give them space to ask any specific questions that they have for us about the process. Before it's 6 o'clock. See if anybody comes off mute and wants to join in, Lisa or Krista. We had another person, I think, lost them, but they're getting late and I think people are going home and we can follow up with people later. Is there anything else you guys want to just jump in and talk about before we wrap up?
All I would say is it may seem like an overwhelming, scary process, but we are here to walk you through it. Again, you're not alone in this. And if it may seem overwhelming and things like that, keep in mind a lot of first-time home buyers, it's about having your team in place. And you have professionals that do this every day, all day long. So you're not just out here trying to figure things out for yourself. That's what we are here for, to support you through the process and to make sure that you have a smooth and seamless closing process. So don't feel intimidated. Don't feel overwhelmed. It's all steps. Everybody plays their role and we're all in it together.
Yeah, I can't agree more. And I think you just nail it right on the head there. I think that people really feel intimidated by this process because and have bad experiences because they don't have great team members and people that they can rely on. And I can speak for everybody here is that you're going to have a great ally and support system getting through this process. And I have not I've not had one tears, not one, I've had panic attacks, but I've talked people off the ledge. But really, it's really about creating a sense of calm and stress-free and educated environment to guide you guys through this. So don't feel intimidated by making those. It's also many steps. So start making baby steps, start talking to us, start figuring out your finances, getting prepared because you have a long road ahead of you. You just don't buy a house in 48 hours. Let's get you on the path to success.
Definitely. I think one last thing I'll say is, again, reiterating teamwork is everything. Having the right team around you is certainly number one. I think one of the words that I wish I could have just highlighted on the screen was equity earlier. And that's probably the number one most powerful, if not the best advantage of being a homeowner is building equity. Equity, again, if you didn't know, you're paying down your loan and your place is appreciating, and that delta in between the amount that is your equity. And it's almost the most surefire way to build wealth is through real estate, especially in New York City. And you can leverage that, guys. And not to get too deep into it, but you can pull out from that in later years and maybe buy more property or pay off debt or renovate your place. And so when you're renting and you're stuck paying the landlord, you're not able to gain equity, and you're doing that for yourself through homeownership. So we're definitely here to help, and I'm super pumped to work with you guys.
I wouldn't be in New York if I hadn't made the smart decision of buying something because I would have been priced out of Red Hook a long time ago. It's just gotten more and more desirable. So do that for yourself. I feel like it was the best. And I'm just going to speak from personal. I was very, I didn't want to buy this house. I tried to talk myself out of it. And even me as an agent, I had an agent. Tina in my office is the best. I trust her with everything. She was my sales agent and she guided me through all of my own. Just because I'm in the industry doesn't mean I don't have the same nervous like second guessing anxiety about this is a huge decision. You need someone in your corner that's going to ride or die with you to the end and tell you what they really think. And I think, having an agent was important even for me and the right team around me because that's who got me across the finish line, not my parents that were making me more anxious and more second guessing all of the decisions I was making. They're like, are you making this financial decision? Your parents are looking out for you, but they don't make you feel a sense of calm a lot of the time. So I want to just thank everybody for joining us tonight, and there are great resources and information to help people get started on buying their first property. And we're going to send everybody's a recording of this call and then everybody's contact information. And please reach out to any one of us. We're here to help you. That's why I do this job. I like helping people and really you're welcome, Christy. So I really appreciate just talking to people and helping them on this journey because I've done it myself. And I think that it's important to just have those first step combos. All good?
Thank you guys.
Okay. Thanks,
Yeah,
guys.
thank you guys.
And thanks for your expertise.